The Bone Road. Part 1. The Summoning. The girl arrived at dusk when the shadow of the gallows stretched across the courtyard like a pointing finger. Kael watched her from the tower window, his scarred hands resting on stone worn smooth by centuries of other watchers. She moved through the crowd of petitioners with a strange grace, her cloak the color of dried blood, her face hidden beneath a hood that seemed to drink the fading light. The others gave her space without realizing they did so, parting like water around a stone. He knew what she was before she reached the gates. The air tasted of ash and iron. "Another one?" Mirren said from behind him, her voice flat. His second-in-command stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her silver hair catching the last rays of sun. "That makes 3 this month." "4, Kael corrected, turning from the window. "You weren't here when the boy came. I sent him away before he reached the inner ward." "And this one?" Kael studied the figure below. The girl had stopped at the gate, speaking with the guards. Even from this distance he could see them leaning away from her, their hands drifting towards sword hilts. "This one," he said quietly. "I'll see." The castle of Thornhaven had been built to keep death out. Ironic, Kael thought, that it now housed the kingdom's most accomplished killer. The walls were 60 feet high, hewn from black granite quarried from mountains that no longer had names. 7 towers rose like broken teeth against the darkening sky. In the courtyards below, soldiers drilled with the mechanical precision of men who knew their skills might never be used, yet trained anyway, because the alternative was thinking too much about what they guarded. What he guarded. Kael descended the spiral stairs, his boots echoing in the narrow space. The castle was always cold, even in summer. The stones remembered winter, people said, though Kael suspected they remembered something older and darker than mere seasons. He found her in the lesser hall, standing before the hearth but not warming herself at the fire. Up close, she was younger than he'd expected, perhaps 25, with a kind of beauty that made people uncomfortable. Sharp cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile, and eyes the color of smoke. Those eyes fixed on him as he entered, and he felt the weight of her attention like a blade against his throat. "Commander Kael Morrigan," she said, not a question. "And you are?" "Desperate." She pushed back her hood, revealing hair so black it seemed to absorb light. "My name is Lyssa Ashborne. I need you to kill someone." Kael had heard many variations of this request over the years. Whispered pleas, shouted demands, quiet desperation wrapped in gold. He'd refused them all. The Morrigan line had been cursed 300 years ago by a dying mage, their bloodline marked for violence. Every generation produced at least one killer of supernatural skill, someone who could end lives with an artist's precision. Kael had tried to escape it, had tried to be something other than the weapon his blood demanded. He failed. Now he simply refused to be anyone's weapon but his own. "The door is behind you," he said. "He's killing children." Kael paused. "The king's justice is bought." Her voice was hard, each word a stone thrown at glass. "Lord Aldrich Vane controls 3 provinces, commands an army, and counts the High Chancellor as his uncle. He takes children from villages along the Crimson River, orphans mostly, and the children of those too poor to complain. He uses them in rituals, dark workings. I've seen the bodies." "Then take your evidence to the crown." "I've tried." Something flickered in those smoke-colored eyes, there and gone like heat lightning. "I was a scholar at the Academy of Luminous Arts. 6 months ago, I discovered texts in the Forbidden Archives, old spells that shouldn't exist. Aldrich Vane has been studying them for years. When I tried to expose him, I was expelled, called a liar, a seeker of attention. His uncle saw to that." Kael walked to a side table where a decanter of wine waited. He poured himself a glass, not offering her one. "And what makes you think I would help you? I'm not a hero. I don't right wrongs or save children." "No," Lyssa agreed, stepping closer. "You kill. But you kill with purpose. I've studied you, Commander. The bandits who plagued the northern roads 5 years ago, found dead every one in a single night. The slaver ring operating from Blackwater Port disappeared. The corrupt magistrate in Milford who was selling indulgences for murder fell from his tower, though the door was locked from the inside and the window too small for a man to fit through." "Speculation," Kael said, but his hand tightened on the glass. "Justice," she countered. "You have a code. You've spent a decade trying to use your curse for something other than slaughter. Help me. Help those children." He wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at him to send her away, to remain in his tower where the only life he risked was his own. But he'd seen the look in her eyes, recognized the weight of witnessed horror. "If I agree to see this evidence," he said carefully, "I promise nothing beyond that." For the first time her expression softened slightly. "That's all I ask." They left at dawn, when the world was still caught between darkness and light. Kael brought Mirren and 4 of his best soldiers, men who'd sworn oaths not to the crown, but to him personally. Lyssa traveled light, carrying only a leather satchel and a staff of dark wood carved with symbols Kael didn't recognize. The Bone Road stretched north from Thornhaven, cutting through the ashwood forest like a scar through flesh. It was an old road, older than the kingdom, built by a civilization that left nothing behind but roads and ruins and questions. The paving stones were made from something that wasn't quite rock, material that never cracked or weathered despite centuries of use. Local legend claimed the road was built on the bones of giants, hence the name, but Kael suspected the truth was stranger and less poetic. They rode in silence for the first hour. Kael found himself stealing glances at Lyssa, trying to reconcile the desperate woman from last night with the focused traveler beside him. She sat her horse with easy competence, her gaze constantly scanning the forest. Whatever else she wasn't pampered.
"Tell me about Aldrich Vane," Kael said finally. Lyssa was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice carried the careful neutrality of someone reciting facts to avoid feeling them. 37 years old, inherited his title when his father died in a hunting accident 8 years ago, though there were whispers it was no accident. Since then, he's tripled his holdings through strategic marriages, intimidation, and what I suspect is blackmail. His estates border the Crimson River, which gives him control over trade routes into the western provinces. And the rituals? Soul-binding. The words fell like stones into water. He's found a way to extend his life by consuming the vitality of others, children specifically, because their life force is purer, less corrupted by the world. The texts in the Forbidden Archives describe the process. It requires elaborate rituals, specific geometric arrangements, and the subject must die in terror for the magic to work properly. Mirren, riding just behind them, made a disgusted sound. "That's demon work." "Not demons," Lyssa corrected. "Older. The magic predates the demon wars by at least 1,000 years. It comes from the time when humans were still learning to shape power, before we understood the costs." Kael considered this. "How many has he killed?" "That I can prove? 17 over the past 3 years, but I suspect the number is much higher. Some of the disappearances might seem natural, children running away or falling into the river, but there's a pattern. Every 6 weeks, like clockwork, a child vanishes from one of the river villages." "And no one's noticed?" "They've noticed, but Vane controls the local magistrates, and the families are usually too poor or frightened to push. He chooses his victims carefully, always from the margins, the invisible ones." The forest grew denser as they traveled, the trees pressing close to the road. This far north, the ashwood still held its old power. Kael could feel it in the air, a thickness that made breathing slightly difficult, as if the forest itself were alive and watching. Ancient oaks twisted into shapes that suggested faces, their branches reaching across the road to form a canopy that blocked most of the light. Moss hung from everything like green funeral shrouds. They made camp that evening in a small clearing just off the road. Kael set watches, more from habit than any real expectation of danger. The Bone Road was generally safe, protected by old magic that predators instinctively avoided. He found Lyssa sitting apart from the others, her staff laid across her knees, staring into the darkness between the trees.
"Not hungry?" he asked, offering her a portion of dried meat and bread. She took it, but didn't eat immediately. "Thank you for coming. I know you didn't have to." Kael settled onto a fallen log nearby, close enough for conversation, but not so close as to intrude. "You said you were a scholar. What did you study?" "Ancient civilizations, particularly the ones that destroyed themselves." A slight smile ghosted across her face. "I was fascinated by the pattern, how every great empire eventually overreaches, dabbles in powers they don't understand, and collapses. I thought if we could understand why, maybe we could avoid the same fate." "Optimistic?" "Naive," she corrected. "I believed institutions could be trusted, that truth mattered more than power. The Academy taught me otherwise. When I discovered what Vane was doing, I thought the Council of Masters would act immediately. Instead, they expelled me and sealed my research. Turns out several council members had accepted generous donations from the Vane family." "So you came to a cursed killer for help?" "Yes." She met his eyes, and he saw something he hadn't expected. Understanding. "We're both trying to be more than what the world made us, aren't we? You were born with death in your blood, but you choose when and how to use it. I was raised to be a good scholar, to accept authority and stay within approved boundaries. We both rebelled." Kael hadn't thought of it that way, but she wasn't wrong. "What happened to your family?" "Dead. Plague when I was 12. I was at the academy, survived because I was quarantined with the other students. My village didn't." She said it matter-of-factly, but Kael heard the old grief underneath, worn smooth by time, but never really healed. "The academy became my family after that, which made the betrayal worse, I suppose." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the forest's night sounds. Somewhere in the darkness an owl called, and something else answered with a sound that might have been laughter or might have been screaming. "Can I ask," Lyssa said eventually, "how it works, the curse?" Most people were afraid to ask. Kael appreciated her directness. "I feel death, not like a premonition, more like a sense of possibility. When I look at someone, I can see the ways they might die, the weaknesses in their body and guard. It's not conscious most of the time, just always there, background noise." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." He'd never admitted that to anyone. "It's why I stay at Thornhaven. The isolation helps. Fewer people means fewer possibilities." "Yet you agreed to help me." "Yes." "Why?" Kael considered the question. Why had he agreed? The obvious answer was the children, the injustice of it. But he'd heard about injustices before and stayed in his tower. What made this different? He looked at Lyssa, at her scarred scholar's hands and tired eyes, and the set of her jaw that suggested she would pursue this alone if necessary, and realized the answer. She reminded him of himself, someone trying to use their skills to matter, to make the darkness mean something. "Because you asked," he said simply. Something passed between them then, a recognition that perhaps neither was quite so alone as they'd thought. Lyssa's smile, when it came, transformed her face, softening the hard edges and revealing the woman she might have been in a kinder world. "Get some rest," Kael said, standing. "We've 3 more days on the road." "Kael?" she called as he turned away. "Thank you. I mean it." He nodded in return to the fire, but he could feel her watching him, and the weight of her gaze was nothing like a blade at all. Part 2. The River Villages.
The Crimson River earned its name from the red clay that lined its banks, turning the water rust-colored in the shallows. The villages along its length were small, suspicious places where strangers were noted and gossip spread faster than fire. Kael's group drew stares as they rode through the first settlement, eyes tracking them from windows and doorways. They stopped at the inn, a sagging two-story building that smelled of old beer and older secrets. The innkeeper, a woman with suspicious eyes and flour-dusted hands, grudgingly provided rooms and information. "Disappearances?" she repeated when Lyssa asked, glancing at Kael as if judging whether he was the law. "Can't say I've noticed anything unusual." "A child went missing here 3 months ago. A boy named Thomas Carver, 12 years old, lived with his grandmother after his parents died of river fever." The innkeeper's expression closed like a door slamming shut. "The boy ran away, looking for work in the capital probably." "In winter? Without supplies or money? Not my business what foolish boys do." She turned away, making it clear the conversation was over. They spent the afternoon asking questions in the village, getting variations of the same response. No one wanted to talk, especially not to outsiders. Kael recognized the signs, people living under the shadow of fear, having learned that some questions brought more trouble than answers. That evening, an old woman approached them as they prepared to leave for the next village. She was bent with age, her face a map of wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp. "You're asking about the missing ones," she said, without preamble. "You knew Thomas Carver?" "I know all of them. I keep count." She glanced around nervously, then gestured for them to follow her. She led them to a small cottage at the edge of the village, away from curious eyes. Inside, the walls were covered with names, dozens of them, scratched into the wooden beams with a knife, dates aside each one. 17 years I've been counting. Started with my granddaughter. She was 8. They said she fell in the river, but I found her shoe a mile from the bank, clean and dry. I knew someone took her." Kael studied the names, the dates. Lyssa had been right about the pattern. Every 6 weeks, almost exactly, a new name appeared. The most recent was dated 2 weeks ago. "Why hasn't anyone gone to the king?" Mirren asked. "Lord Vane is the king's justice here," bitterly said the old woman. "We tried once. A group of us, 5 years back, traveled to the capital to petition the crown. On the way back, our cart broke an axle. 3 of us died in the accident. The others lost their nerve. Message received." "Do you know where Vane takes them?" Kael asked.
The old temple in the ruins past Greystone Village. It's been abandoned for centuries, but lights are seen there sometimes, late at night. And sounds. Terrible sounds. She looked at each of them in turn. "If you're thinking of going there, you should know. Others have tried. Armed men, hunters, even a few soldiers who thought they'd be heroes. None came back." "We're not them," Lyssa said softly. "No," the old woman agreed, studying Lyssa's face. "No, I don't suppose you are. There's death in your eyes, girl. Both of you." She nodded at Kael. "Maybe that's what it takes." Before they left, the old woman pressed something into Lyssa's hand, a small carved figure, crude but clearly made with care. "For luck," she said, "and so you remember why you're doing this. That was my granddaughter's, only thing I have left of her." Lyssa's fingers closed around the carving, and Kael saw her jaw tighten. "I'll bring it back," she promised. "No," the old woman said. "Keep it. Just make sure he pays. That's all I ask. Make sure he pays for all of them." They continued north, following the river. The landscape grew wilder, the villages smaller and more desperate. Everywhere they asked, they found the same pattern.
Missing children, terrified silence, and the shadow of Aldrich Vane. On the third night, as they camped in the ruins of an old way station, Kael found Lyssa sitting on a crumbling wall, the carved figure in her hands, tears streaming silently down her face. He almost walked away, giving her privacy, but something, the same instinct that had made him agree to this journey, made him stay. "I can't stop thinking about them," she said, without looking up. "All those children, alone, terrified, not understanding why, and we're supposed to just, what? Find Vane, kill him, and that makes it right? It doesn't bring them back. It doesn't undo what was done." Kael sat beside her on the wall. "No, it doesn't." "Then why do it?" "Because the alternative is letting it continue. I've killed 73 people, Lyssa. I remember every one. Their faces, the exact moment the light left their eyes. It doesn't get easier, and it shouldn't. The day it does, I'll know I've become the monster my curse wants me to be." "How do you live with it?" "I tell myself that each death prevented other deaths. The bandits would have killed travelers. The slavers were destroying lives. The corrupt magistrate was enabling murders. It's not redemption. There's no redemption for people like me. But it's purpose. It's taking the worst thing about myself and using it for something other than random violence." Lyssa was quiet for a long moment. "I killed someone once, at the Academy. Another student, a boy named Marcus. He attacked me late one night, tried to, well, I'd been practicing combat magic in secret, defensive spells the council didn't approve of women learning. I reacted without thinking, hit him with a blast of force that threw him into a wall, broke his neck. She looked down at her hands as if seeing blood there. They ruled it self-defense, but I saw how people looked at me after, like I was dangerous, like I might do it again." "Would you? Have you?"
I don't know. I thought I had. But now, thinking about facing Vane, about what I'll need to do, she trailed off. I'm not like you, Kael. I'm not a killer. Good. He surprised himself with the vehemence of the word. Stay that way as long as you can. When we face Vane, I'll handle the killing. You focus on breaking whatever magic he's using, stopping the ritual if it's in progress. Use your skills, not mine. And if you fail, I won't. She turned to look at him then, really look at him, and he felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with physical vulnerability. You're trying to protect me. Why? Because you remind me there are still things worth protecting, he thought, but didn't say. Instead, he offered a truth that was safer. Because you brought me out of my tower. Because you reminded me that isolation isn't the same as safety, just a slower kind of dying. Lyssa's hand found his on the wall, her fingers cool against his scarred knuckles. Thank you for that, for all of this. Kael didn't trust himself to speak. They sat together in the darkness, hands touching, and he thought that maybe after a decade of deliberate solitude, he'd forgotten what it meant to want someone's presence instead of fearing it. Tell me about Thornhaven, Lyssa said after a while. What's it like, living in a castle built to keep death out? Cold, quiet, safe. Kael smiled slightly. Mirren says I'm wasting away up there, that I'll turn into a ghost if I'm not careful. She's probably right, but it's the only way I've found to live with what I am. What if there was another way? What do you mean? Lyssa hesitated, then spoke carefully, as if feeling out an idea as she explained it. The curse on your bloodline. Have you ever tried to break it? It's been tried. My grandfather spent a fortune on mages, hedge witches, even a priest from the Eastern temples. Nothing worked. The curse is woven into our blood, part of what we are. But what if you didn't break it, just channeled it differently? Magic is just energy shaped by will and understanding. The killing instinct, the sensitivity to death, what if that could be transformed into something else? Protection instead of destruction.
Preservation instead of ending. You're talking about changing the fundamental nature of a 300-year-old curse. Yes, she met his eyes, and he saw the scholar in her again, excited by the puzzle despite the surrounding darkness. The forbidden archives had texts about curse transformation. It's rare, incredibly difficult, but possible. After we deal with Vane, if you wanted to try. Why would you do that for me? Maybe I'm not doing it for you. Her smile was soft in the moonlight. Maybe I'm doing it because I'd like to imagine a future where we could both be more than what we've been, where I'm not just an exiled scholar chasing vengeance, and you're not just a cursed killer hiding in a tower. Something in Kael's chest tightened, a feeling he hadn't experienced in so long he'd almost forgotten its name. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of it. The dangerous idea that things might be different. "Let's survive the next few days first," he said, but his hand tightened slightly around hers. "Then we can talk about impossible futures." Deal. They sat together until the fire burned low, talking about small things, favorite foods, books they'd read, places they'd dreamed of traveling to. Ordinary conversation, the kind normal people had, and for a few hours they could pretend that's what they were, just two people finding connection in the darkness, rather than a cursed killer and an exiled scholar on a path toward violence and blood. Part 3. The Ruins. Greystone Village was dying. Half the building stood empty, their windows dark and hollow. The few people they saw moved like ghosts, hurrying about their business without meeting anyone's eyes. The inn had closed, so they camped on the village's outskirts, beneath a sky threatening rain. "The temple is 2 miles northeast," Lyssa said, studying a hand-drawn map she'd obtained from the silent villagers. "Built during the Second Age, dedicated to a god whose name has been lost. When the kingdom fell, the temple was abandoned. Local legends say it's cursed." "Convenient," Mirren observed. "Keep people away from your ritual site by feeding superstition." "Maybe," Lyssa said, "but some of the legends predate Vane. There might be real danger there beyond what he's added." They approached the ruins at dusk, leaving the horses with 2 soldiers, while Kael, Lyssa, Mirren, and 2 others went forward on foot. The temple emerged from the forest like a broken tooth, its walls crumbled and overgrown with vines that moved in the breeze like grasping fingers. The architecture was wrong, Kael noticed. The angles didn't quite match, creating a sense of disorientation even from a distance. The stones were black, like Thornhaven's, but these seemed to absorb light rather than just reflecting it poorly. Looking at the ruins made his eyes water. "Gods," one of the soldiers whispered. "This place feels evil." "Not evil," Lyssa corrected, though her voice was tight. "Just very, very old. The builders understood things about space and reality that we've forgotten. They made places that exist slightly outside normal geometry. Stay close together, and don't trust your sense of direction once we're inside." They found the entrance on the western side, a gaping archway with the remnants of doors hanging from corroded hinges. Beyond lay darkness that their torches barely penetrated. Kael felt his curse stir as they entered, the sensitivity to death sharpening to an almost painful degree. "There are bodies here," he said quietly, "recent and old." "How many?" Mirren asked, her hand on her sword. "I can't tell. Dozens at least." They moved through corridors that shouldn't exist, passages that turned back on themselves, and stairs that seemed to lead both up and down simultaneously. The air smelled of stone and something sweeter, like flowers left too long in a vase. Blood, Kael realized. Old blood, soaked into the stone and rotting. They found the first body in what might have been a chapel. A young man, perhaps 18, tied to a stone pillar. His eyes were open, mouth frozen in a scream, but there wasn't a mark on him. Kael checked for a pulse anyway, knowing he'd find none. "Soul drain," Lyssa said, her voice shaking. "His life was pulled out, leaving just the shell. He probably died of terror before the actual extraction finished." "This is recent," Kael observed. "Within the last day, Vane might still be here." They moved deeper, finding more bodies, all young, all unmarked, all wearing the same expression of absolute horror. Kael forced himself to memorize each face. These weren't just victims, they were the reason for what came next. The central chamber was vast, with a ceiling lost in darkness and walls covered in carvings that hurt to look at. In the center, geometric patterns had been carved into the floor, channels filled with dried blood, forming shapes that pulled at the eye and made the mind slip sideways. And in the heart of the pattern, fresh blood still wet, knelt Aldrich Vane. He was younger looking than Kael had expected for 37, with the kind of handsome features that came from good breeding and better magic. His clothes were fine, embroidered silk that seemed obscene in this place of death. He looked up as they entered and smiled. "Kael Morrigan," he said pleasantly, "I've been expecting you. Well, not you specifically, but someone like you. The pattern required an interruption." "Step away from the circle," Kael said, his hand on his sword. "Or what, you'll kill me?" Vane laughed, rising to his feet. "Please do. That's exactly what I need. You see, I've taken 17 lives very carefully over 3 years. 17 is a powerful number, significant in the old magic. But 17 only prepares the working. To complete it, I need 18, and the 18th must be special. A death dealer, someone whose very existence is steeped in ending lives, someone cursed. You." Kael felt his blood turn to ice. "You wanted me here." "Of course, though I expected someone easier to bait. Your reputation for protecting children is well documented. I gambled that someone credible brought you evidence of my crimes you'd investigate, and here you are." "The Academy," Lyssa breathed. "You arranged for me to find that research. You let me be expelled, knowing I'd seek help." "Very good, Miss Ashborne. Yes, I ensured you'd discover my work. I needed someone intelligent enough to understand what I was doing, but not powerful enough to stop me alone. Someone who would seek out the Morrigan. You played your part beautifully." "You bastard," Lyssa snarled, and power crackled around her staff. Now, Vane chided, "don't waste your strength. You're merely the catalyst. Though I'll admit I hadn't expected you to fall for each other so thoroughly. That's a nice bonus. His death will hurt you more, and strong emotions fuel the magic beautifully." Kael's mind raced. The ritual, the pattern, the manipulation, all of it leading to this moment. What happens when you complete the working? "I transcend." Vane's eyes gleamed with fanatic certainty. "The 17 deaths give me their stolen years, but it's still human immortality, just extended. The 18th death, yours, will transform me into something more. No longer bound by flesh and time. I'll become eternal, truly eternal, with all the power that implies." "You'll become a monster," Lyssa said. "I'll become a god, and you'll have helped me get there." Vane began to speak in a language Kael didn't recognize, words that made the air thick and hard to breathe. The blood in the channels on the floor began to glow, a sickly green light that cast writhing shadows on the walls. "Stop him!" Myron shouted, drawing her sword. She charged forward, but the moment she crossed the outer circle, she froze, her body locked in place, muscles straining but unable to move. The 2 soldiers met the same fate, trapped mid-stride like insects in amber. "Only those named by the pattern can move freely," Vane explained, still chanting between words. "Kael Morrigan and Lyssa Ashborne. Everyone else is bound." Kael drew his sword, feeling his curse surge through him. He could see Vane's death now, could map the exact angle and force needed to end him. But something was wrong. The pattern on the floor pulsed with light, and he realized with cold certainty, killing Vane inside the circle would complete the ritual, not stop it. His death here would feed the magic. "Don't kill him!" Lyssa shouted, realizing the same thing. "We need to break the circle first." But Vane was moving now, drawing a knife from his belt. Too late for that, I'm afraid. The ritual is nearly complete. All I need is for Morrigan to die within the pattern, and it doesn't matter who strikes the fatal blow. Come, killer, show me the death that lives in your blood. Vane lunged at Kael, knife flashing. Kael parried easily. Vane was skilled but not extraordinary, and could have killed him a dozen ways in as many seconds. Instead, he retreated, trying to lead Vane away from the circle. Vane laughed, not following. You can't leave. The pattern binds you here now. You accepted the invitation when you entered the chamber. Fight or flee, it doesn't matter. Eventually, you'll die within the circle, and I'll ascend. Lyssa was working frantically, her staff tracing symbols in the air as she chanted counterspells. The green light flickered but didn't die. The blood is the anchor. I need to erase the channels, but the magic's too strong. I can't break it alone. Kael's curse showed him Lyssa's death then, if he didn't act. Vane's knife finding her throat while she was distracted, blood spilling onto the pattern, the ritual consuming her life instead. Not the intended death, but death nonetheless, and the pattern would drink it eagerly. No, not her. In that moment, Kael understood what he had to do. The curse in his blood, the killing instinct. Lyssa had been right. It was just energy, shaped by understanding and will. He'd spent a decade trying to suppress it, to use it sparingly and carefully. What if instead he used all of it at once, but directed it not at a person, but at the magic itself?
Lyssa, he said calmly, trust me. She looked at him, saw something in his face, and nodded. Kael closed his eyes and stopped fighting. The curse roared through him like a dam breaking, that terrible sensitivity to death expanding until it filled the chamber. He could feel every dead thing in the ruins, every murdered child, every victim of Vane's appetite for immortality. And beneath it all, he felt the death woven into the ritual itself, because that's what it was, really. A death of the natural order, reality dying to birth something unnatural. He struck out, not with his sword, but with his will, taking the death sense that had haunted him his entire life and focusing it like a blade, not at Vane, but at the ritual, at the unnatural life being born from 17 deaths. The green light shuddered, the blood in the channels began to smoke. "What are you doing?" Vane screamed. "Stop! You'll destroy everything!" "That's the idea," Kael gritted out. His nose was bleeding, he realized distantly. Something was tearing inside him, the curse straining against its bounds. But he held on, pouring everything he had into killing the ritual itself. Lyssa understood immediately. Her own magic joined his, not fighting, but supporting, giving shape to the formless death sense. Together they struck at the heart of the pattern. The green light exploded, the blood in the channels evaporated, becoming smoke that stank of copper and char. The geometric patterns on the floor cracked, lines breaking and reforming into meaningless shapes. Vane collapsed, screaming. Without the ritual to sustain him, all 17 stolen lifespans tried to leave him at once. He aged in seconds, skin withering, hair falling out, until he was nothing but a desiccated husk in expensive clothes. The binding on the others released. Mirren stumbled forward, catching Kael as he fell. "Got you," she said, lowering him to the ground. "What in the hells did you just do?" Kael couldn't answer. The world spun, and he tasted blood. Using the curse like that, turning it against magic itself, it had cost him. He could feel something fundamental had shifted inside him, as if he'd torn open a wound that had been carefully stitched closed for 30 years. Lyssa knelt beside him, her hands glowing with soft healing magic. "Don't try to talk. You burned through your own life force to kill the ritual. I've never seen anything like it." "Is he?" Kael managed, looking toward Vane's corpse. "Dead, very dead, and not coming back." Lyssa's healing magic flowed into him, warm and steadying. "You saved us, saved all of us. But at what cost?
Kael could feel the curse differently now, quieter but also more present, as if their desperate union had created something new, not broken, but transformed. He thought of Lyssa's words by the campfire about channeling the curse differently and wondered if he'd accidentally done exactly that. They searched the temple afterward, documenting everything. In chambers beyond the ritual room, they found Vane's records, meticulous notes detailing each murder, each stolen life, written in a neat hand as if he were recording crop yields. Lyssa gathered them all, her face carved from stone, speaking to no one. They also found the children, not alive, that mercy had been denied them, but their remains, carefully preserved in a side chamber as if Vane had been keeping trophies. 17 small bodies, arranged with grotesque care.
"We'll take them home," Kael said quietly. "Every one. Their families deserve to bury them properly." It took 2 days to prepare the bodies for transport, and another week to return them to their villages. At each stop, they delivered a child and Vane's confession of guilt, written in his own hand. The grief was terrible to witness, mothers collapsing, fathers weeping, whole villages mourning. But beneath the sorrow, Kael saw something else. Relief. The monster was dead. The disappearances would end. At the last village, the old woman who'd shown them the wall of names took Lyssa's hands in her own. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for remembering them." Lyssa returned the carved figure, pressing it into the old woman's palm. "She mattered," she said, her voice breaking. "They all mattered." "Yes," the old woman agreed, "and now the world knows it." Part 4. The Return. They returned to Thornhaven as autumn painted the ashwood in shades of fire. The journey was quieter this time, marked by long silences that felt less awkward than contemplative. Kael found himself watching Lyssa when she wasn't looking, noticing small things, how she twisted a strand of hair when deep in thought, the way she smiled at birds, the careful grace with which she moved through the world. He caught him looking once, raising an eyebrow. "Something on my face?" "Just thinking." "Dangerous habit." "Says the scholar." She laughed, and the sound made something in Kael's chest feel lighter than it had in years. Thornhaven loomed before them, black and severe against the autumn sky. Kael had left it feeling trapped, a self-imposed prison. Now, seeing it again, he felt different. The castle hadn't changed, but he had. "It's beautiful," Lyssa said, surprising him, in a stern, forbidding way, like it's challenging the sky. "Most people find it grim." "Most people haven't seen what we've seen. This is honest architecture. It doesn't pretend to be something it's not." They settled into a routine over the following weeks. Lyssa took over one of the unused tower rooms, converting it into a study. Books arrived by cart from the capital, friends from the Academy who'd believed her story, sending texts on curse-breaking and magical transformation. Kael found excuses to visit, bringing tea, asking questions, just being near her. "You're hovering," she told him one evening, not looking up from an ancient tome written in a language Kael didn't recognize. "I'm interested in your research." "You're interested in me." She did look up then, pinning him with those smoke-colored eyes. "It's all right. I'm interested in you, too." The admission hung between them, heavy with possibility. "Lyssa," Kael started, then stopped. What could he say? That he'd spent a decade avoiding connection because he was afraid of what his curse might do? That she terrified him more than any enemy because she made him want things he'd taught himself not to want? "Come here," she said, setting aside her book. He crossed the room, and she stood to meet him. They were close enough now that he could see the flecks of silver in her eyes, could feel the warmth of her breath. "I'm not good at this," he admitted.
"Neither am I." Her hand found his, fingers lacing together. "But I think maybe we could figure it out together, if you want to." "I want to," he said, and meant it with a fierceness that surprised him. "But Lyssa, I'm still cursed, still dangerous. What if—" She stopped him with a kiss, soft and sure, and tasting of mint tea. When she pulled back, her smile was gentle. "What if we stop borrowing trouble? We've faced dark magic and death rituals. I think we can handle a relationship." "A relationship?" Kael repeated, testing the word. "Is that what this is?" "If you'll have me, a cursed killer and an exiled scholar, we make quite a pair." "The worst pair," Kael agreed, and kissed her again. The curse transformation took months. Lyssa worked through ancient texts, consulting with hedge witches and hermit mages who lived in the wild places. Slowly, carefully, she developed a theory. The curse couldn't be broken, but it could be reforged. Its purpose shifted from destruction to protection. "The death sense is the key," she explained one evening, both of them exhausted from a day of testing. "Right now, it shows you how things can die, but death and life are connected, two sides of the same force. What if we could invert it, make it show you how things can live instead?" "That's possible?" "Theoretically." She rubbed her temples, fighting headache. "The ritual would be dangerous. It requires you to die, in a sense. Let the cursed part of you die while keeping the essential you alive. And you'd need an anchor, someone to hold your life thread while the curse unravels and reforms." "You," Kael said. "Me," she agreed. "If you trust me." With my life, he'd never been more certain of anything. They performed the ritual in the deepest vault of Thornhaven, where the old magic was strongest. Lyssa had spent weeks preparing, inscribing circles of protection and life-binding, gathering components from across the kingdom. Mirren stood guard outside, under strict instructions not to interfere no matter what she heard. Kael lay in the center of the pattern, Lyssa kneeling beside him with one hand on his chest, over his heart. "This is going to hurt," he knew. "I know. I mean really hurt. You're going to feel the curse dying, and it won't go quietly. I trust you." She began the incantation, words in that old language that made reality bend. The curse fought immediately, surging through Kael's blood like poison. He screamed, couldn't help it, as 300 years of accumulated death thrashed inside him. But Lyssa held on, her magic a steady anchor, and slowly, so slowly, the curse began to change. The death sense that had haunted him his entire life unraveled, thread by thread, and reformed into something new. He could feel it happening, the fundamental nature of his perception shifting. When it was over, Kael lay gasping on the stone floor. Lyssa collapsed beside them. They'd both aged years in that hour, lines etched around their eyes, but they were alive. "Did it work?" he asked when he could speak. Lyssa helped him set up, and Kael looked at her, really looked, and gasped. Instead of seeing the ways she could die, he saw how she lived, the strength in her, the resilience, the careful balance of systems that kept her breathing and thinking and being. It was beautiful in a way the death sense had never been. "It worked," he breathed. "Gods, Lyssa, it worked." She smiled, tears streaming down her face. "Good, because I don't think I could do that again." They helped each other to their feet, leaning on one another, and stumbled out of the vault. Mirren took one look at them and shook her head. "You two look terrible." "We feel terrible," Lyssa agreed, "but it's done." Over the following weeks, Kael learned to use his transformed curse. The life sense was subtler than the death sense had been, requiring focus and intention rather than being always on. But when he used it, he could see injuries before they became fatal, could sense sickness before it took hold. He couldn't heal, that required different magic, but he could identify what needed healing. "You've become a diagnostician," Lyssa said one evening as they walked the battlements. "The most precise doctor in the kingdom, probably." "Strange way to end up," Kael admitted. "The cursed killer turned healer?" "Not healer, protector." She leaned against him, and he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. You were always trying to protect people, even when you were killing. Now you can do it more directly." Winter came to Thornhaven, but the castle felt less cold than before. Lyssa's presence had transformed it, filling empty rooms with books and warmth and purpose. She continued her research, now officially pardoned by the Crown after her role in stopping Vane became known. The Academy even offered to reinstate her, but she declined. "Why go back?" she said when Kael asked. "Everything I need is here." "Everything? Don't fish for compliments, you know I mean you. Say it anyway." She laughed and kissed him, and Kael marveled at how ordinary it had become, this thing that had seemed impossible a year ago. Love, he supposed, though the words still felt too small for what he felt. Epilogue. Spring. Spring arrived late that year, but when it came, it transformed the Ashwood overnight. Green burst from every branch, and flowers carpeted the forest floor. Kael and Lyssa rode out on a clear morning, following the Bone Road north out of habit more than destination. They stopped at the way station where Lyssa had cried over the carved figure, where Kael had first admitted the weight of his curse. It seemed like a lifetime ago now, though barely a year had passed. "I've been thinking," Kael said, sitting on the same crumbling wall, "about what comes next."
"Next? We stopped Vane. You transformed your curse, but there are other Vanes in the world, other people using magic for terrible purposes, other children who need protection." Kael studied her face, seeing where this was going. "You want to leave Thornhaven." "Not permanently, but yes, sometimes. There's so much we could do together. Your life sense could identify magical corruption, my knowledge could counter it. We could be, I don't know, consultants? Investigators? Heroes sounds too grandiose. Sounds dangerous." Yes, she met his eyes, and he saw the old determination there, tempered now with wisdom and shared pain. "But I think maybe we're meant for dangerous things, just not the kind we were born to." Kael considered it. A year ago, the idea of leaving Thornhaven would have terrified him. Now, with Lyssa beside him and his curse transformed into something he could live with, the world seemed less threatening and more full of possibility. "All right," he said, "but we do it carefully. No more rushing into ancient temples without proper preparation." "Agreed. We'll be very careful, very methodical consultants who occasionally solve magical crimes and stop dark rituals." "When you put it that way, it sounds almost reasonable." "Nothing about us is reasonable," Lyssa pointed out, "but I think that's all right. Reasonable people don't change the world." They rode back to Thornhaven as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The castle rose before them, still dark and forbidding, but no longer a prison. Now it was home, a place to return to between adventures, a constant in a world that had become suddenly, thrillingly uncertain. That evening, Kael stood in his tower room, their tower room now, as Lyssa had gradually moved her things in, and looked out over the kingdom. Somewhere out there, people needed help, children needed protection, injustice waited to be confronted. But tonight, he had Lyssa's hand in his, and the rest of his life stretching before him, no longer bound by a curse that demanded death. He'd been remade, they both had, forged in darkness into something that could bear light. "What are you thinking?" Kael asked, joining him at the window. "That I'm happy," Kael said simply. "For the first time in my life, I'm actually happy." "Good." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You deserve it. We both do." They stood together as night fell over Thornhaven, two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. The Bone Road stretched north into shadow, and somewhere on it, new stories waited to be written. But for now, there was this, a cursed killer learning to protect instead of destroy, an exiled scholar finding purpose beyond revenge, and the quiet miracle of two broken people making each other whole. The castle stood silent around them, its stones remembering centuries of death. But in the tower, in the gathering dark, life bloomed like spring flowers through winter snow, fragile
unexpected and absolutely real. And that, Kael thought, as he held Lyssa close, was its own kind of magic, the best kind, the kind worth fighting for, the kind worth living for.